Okay, so this is a video to discuss a number of topics, and one of them is how to type somebody, how to type yourself, the process, how to go about doing that. The other subject is how the Enneagram is defined, what the Enneagram is. So, first of all, these are talking about the same thing, which is the Enneagram is essentially the chief feature, main characteristic, passion. All of these words are trying to get at the same underlying concept. Okay. Gurdjieff was famous for defining the Enneagram chief feature, also known as the Enneagram type, the early form of an Enneagram type before they were called types, what that point on the Enneagram represents. Each point represents a personality problem, an ego problem, an identification, a fixation point, this core idea. And there are different ways of describing it and fleshing it out. Everything you see that are specific to the types, the numbers themselves, and concepts that are specific and identical to types relate to that particular characteristic, that fixation, which is the Enneagram type. Okay. The simplest one we know of is the 9 passions, the 7 deadly sins, famously 7 deadly sins, plus 2 other ones that are not so famous. And these represent the Enneagram points. Okay. Now, the personality types, this is a lingo terminology issue. So some people talk more about personality types. Others talk more about fixation and use more spiritual language. There are several different varieties of Enneagram lingo that people use. But it's all the same thing. It really is. It's not identical. I didn't say it was identical, but it is on a deeper level, it's the same. Okay, it's as if you're looking at Roman numerals versus Arabic numerals for what that number means, 1 through 9. Okay, it's using different terminology, different aspects, different angles even, different, you're looking at different facets and different dimensions of this space within the type. Now, when you think about it, the Enneagram is as complex as human beings are. You have 9 types, 9 fixation points, 9 Enneagram points, and this covers billions of individual people. Because this is a way of mapping any given person where their fixation point is on the Enneagram, okay? So, all of this being said, we need to keep a few core ideas in mind. One is that you need to type yourself. You can have help, you can receive feedback, you do need to study, you need to read, and you need to introspect, but you need to be the one that types yourself. Okay, that's how we know as individual people what our types are. You could have a whole room full of people that have typed you as a 3, and unless you type yourself as a 3 in your Enneagram work, their typing of you is going to be completely irrelevant. Okay, it needs to be proven. This operates on the principle that we all have the ability to determine, to understand the types and understand ourselves. If we allow other people to determine our types for us, then this assumes suddenly that we don't have the same power as other people, that they are better than us, that they know more than we do, that they can vote and they can be more powerful as a group, and it assumes many things that undermine the basic sovereign individual structure that the Enneagram is built on. which are the same types of values that we would live in our daily lives. You would expect somebody to respect your independence, your free will, your agency, your autonomy, that they would be on an equal playing field as you in other ways too. So think of it a little bit like the economy. We all use the same currency, and it wouldn't be fair for another man to go down to the shop and buy, using pesos when you're in America. We use dollars here. So that's what we use in the Enneagram. We use that same regulation system. And again, we all determine our own type. We respect basic human faculties that I can read, you can read. We can all perceive using our eyes, the five senses, the brain. We're people. Doesn't mean that people always have their types right. Doesn't mean that. But if they don't, you can't necessarily prove to them, and you can't prove to yourself. You basically don't be so confident. I think that at the end of the day, if you've typed yourself, you should be sure of your own type, and you can be sure of that. As sure as you can be of that, be sure of that, but don't be so sure of other people's types, especially if those people are quite sure that you're wrong, or they suspect you could be wrong. The Enneagram is such a perceivable, simple system that if I have a completely different view on my type from what other people do, you wouldn't want to give them the benefit of the doubt, because that assumes that I don't know anything about myself, right? It kind of assumes that they know everything and that they can figure it out and that I can't. And, once you get to that point, it can be incredibly toxic. It can be damaging to people. You can have a dictator of a forum take over and make people feel unwelcome, like they don't know their types. They can trick other people. They can convince other people. Once you have somebody who understands how to influence people and who has that ability and that power, for example, an administrator on a forum or somebody who creates lists, who is now setting the standards for what other people's types are, that is a smear campaign against people. If they're trying to stand up for themselves and say, no, I'm not that type of person. I am type 1, they have me as a 6, and it becomes a power struggle. And the individual will lose in a corrupt system. They will lose. If the leader has the power instead of the individual will lose. They will be gaslighted about their type. They will be surrounded by people who don't trust them, don't believe them, call them stupid, call them foolish, call them ignorant, are certain that they have their type wrong, and this can lead a person to lose their mind, feel depressed, go in circles, feel like an outcast. And so it's very important to stick with this and understand this logic. It's the logic that any individual person would use. Asking for help about your type is different, but telling people what type they are and deciding for them is completely anathema, and should never happen. It can be the downfall of a society. And all of the Enneagram types have to be standardized and understood as the summation of all the literatures, and that we all have the ability to understand that there aren't multiple Enneagram systems. A 1 in Richard Rohr's Enneagram is the same 1 that you have in Russ Hudson's Enneagram. The interpretations differ slightly, but in theory, any given individual who's a 1 in this system would be typed as a 1 in the other system too. That is the verisimilitude and the symmetry and harmony that you're looking for within this. Because we know that if we go beneath the surface of the type and look at what's operating under there, the seeds of the whole thing, they should be the same ideas, the same big picture ideas. And an individual then who studies 10 texts will be able to say, okay, yes, I am a type 1, and I am literally a 1 in every book, but some aspects of 1 make more sense to me than others, and if you're really thoughtful, you can probably see how the different fixes and instincts tie into it, and also different ways of different strengths different authors have when it comes to fleshing out certain aspects of the types. and certain biases. They all have limitations and biases. But nevertheless, you should see that it is talking about the same type. That is your type. And it's useful if you know your instincts, your wing, your fixes. That way you can help explain maybe some of why you identify with this author or that author more than another. But at the end of the day, you accept that you are a given type, because there is enough consistency within the Enneagram to achieve this for all individuals. I'm certain of it. It's the way that it's constructed and the way it was developed over time. These are the same types. It might be challenging sometimes for people to determine their type, and their core type especially, because now you have your trifix. The core type, it can be a little bit tricky, but that is a basic principle, a function of how the Enneagram works. If you disagree with that, then I believe that you are not understanding something, that you are fundamentally talking about a different reality. So that's very important, extremely important that people understand that. Otherwise, it becomes very confusing. The types are incredibly broad. You have 9 types for billions of people. So, yeah, they are varied in how they're described. The individual text has to get at the ideas behind it all. If it's too specific about how it describes an individual, that's a little bit like saying, type 5s tend to be 5 feet 5 inches tall or something. It's not accurate. Once we get far enough away from the spiritual motivations and so forth behind the whole thing, people make mistakes about what makes a person a type. Suddenly you have someone that thinks that just because someone's wearing glasses, they're a head type. Okay, or just because somebody's physically strong, that they're a gut type, or that they're a sexual type, or something. There are possible correlations with those types of manifestations. There certainly can be, because you can find certain patterns that happen, but they are complex. They're very complex patterns, and they shouldn't be assumed. If you try to assume, which is essentially what vibe typing is, or phototyping, where you look at a picture and say, aha, does this look like the other type 8s I know, or the other type 2s I know, yes or no, that is fallacious. That is not going to work. You might have some decent results, but to use that as a viable, accurate method, no, there's just no way. You cannot rely on that. The only way to really rely on is to type yourself. And for typing celebrities, okay, sure, we can do that as a group, or you can do it yourself. But when it comes to the individual person, how did you type yourself? That's the way that other people should type themselves. It shouldn't be you that comes along. And there are many reasons, why people might be attracted to wanting to type other people. It feeds our ego, makes us feel powerful, and makes us feel like, we have status over them, and that we have the inside track on something that they don't understand. And so there are egoic reasons why we would project those patterns. And also wanting to understand the world, wanting to simplify, what's going on. We want to see, you look just like this other 4 I know, and you're similar, and so you must be 4. And sometimes that's true. Really, it can be. Certainly it can be. But there's also times it's not true. And so how well do you really know somebody at the point that you're trying to type them? And at what point is enough enough? And the person themselves will always have the inner track on that, being them. So the real solution is to ask them. Say, okay, so does this type make sense? Because you know yourself better than I know you. If I talk to somebody and I have an idea in my head on what their type might be, and then they tell me that it's differently, the first thing I do is I listen to what they said and say, okay, yeah, sure, let's go with that. Let's go with that first. And then We can always talk about that, and if they change their mind, they change their mind. But I should be the one to change my mind because I know I'm coming into it with my own biases. Anyway, they talk about all of this in various texts. It's not stuff I made up. It's out there. Even Reese and Hudson say that we should be, objective about ourselves and subjective about others. So that means that we see from their side when we're them, see how they would see themselves, and then with us, we try to see from the outside perspective, which doesn't mean that we let them type us. It means that we all use the same logic that they used to type themselves. We use the same rules. Okay, so that's what they were trying to get at. Whether they can explain it that well is another matter entirely, but it follows from basic ethics and understanding of how all this works. It's kind of common sense, common knowledge. Yeah. Okay. Hope it makes sense. Good luck to you. Talk to you later.